Hey, Geezer and Don and Stefan, Eon, David, JB, how you doing? Chris? Ah, oh man, you're right, Donald. I know. I got in trouble twice. First from my wife for being late to breakfast, and now late again. Uh, hey, Lee, how you doing? Oh, there's two Lees. There's Lee and Lee. How you guys doing? Dr. A and B. Boy, Dr. A and B, you're early. Usually you get here later on. Oh boy. I sort of went down a rabbit hole. Hi, Flip and Zippo and Dwayne and Donald. How you guys doing? The rabbit hole that I went down is my favorite rabbit hole. And that is when I go after a movement and try to find everything about it. Hi, Junior. Paul, how are you? Flip and Zippo? And you love the goats, huh? ZL, how are you? Oh, boy. One of the things that we all want, I think so anyway, is we want good information. Hi, Tim. Okay. So anyway, like I said, I went down, I was doing all this research, and you get to a point where you find things that don't sync up somehow. And so you say, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. What to do. And by that I mean, who are you gonna believe? You know, remember the old gold busters, who are you gonna call? And so I wanted to talk about that. And let me give you one example. There's this guy who has things on what's it called? Watch Pro site, I think is the name of it, something like that. And this guy knows stuff. He really does. Because whenever I check stuff out 5 ways from Sunday, this guy's always right. And so when I have a question about something, I try to find something by this guy. And on this last thing, I did. Hi, Emmanuel. How you doing? So so I saw something by him, and it was just a little comment. He was reviewing One Watch and had made a comment about the movement in it, and then compared it to another movement and said they changed something. Now it was like, okay, you have these two movements, and but one changed in a little way, which totally opened up the whole thing for me. Because once I found the relationship between these two movements, one which was an older one and one which is a brand new one, I was able to find all of the information I wanted on it from the website, from the Roger Dubuis website. So other times I come across things and people will say things that I don't know whether they're true or not. Sometimes they just, they're off the top of somebody's head. They say they think it, so it must be true. Others of it are, the people who I think know the least are the ones who make the most noise about it. This is why somebody says it's absolutely this or absolutely that, I don't even listen to them. It's just sort of a stupid habit they picked up. Wait until they take a philosophy class and learn about absolutes. But I was sort of going to ask you guys the same thing. How do you know something? Where's your source? Let me give you one more example, okay? You're probably familiar with Tim Miso, who does watch descriptions for Watchbox. And whenever I listen to one of his descriptions and demonstrations of a watch, I want to run out and buy it. I mean, he's really good. He goes into detail. He talks about the movement. He talks about all kinds of stuff. And he's really very good about it. And there was this one watch that I saw, and it turned out to be something totally different than I had expected. He was talking about this watch, and really great. I'm sitting there salivating. And then he mentions the movement in it. And I was totally caught by surprise. It wasn't the movement at all that I had hoped for nor expected. Now, that wasn't bad, and it was good to know because this guy was providing good information. But at the same time, wanting the person who's listening to it to get the watch. And, I don't think you could ask for a better salesman because Tim appears to be, to me anyway, he's really into watches, and he really likes him. He likes to find out a lot about him, and and he knows what he's talking about. But on the other hand, somebody said, "Well, Tim's that way with all watches." It's like, man, this is the best watch in the world to have. And I suppose if you're selling watches or you're working for a company that's selling watches, that's a good way to be. But on the other hand, there's a lot of good information in there. Anyway, hey, Dominic, how you doing? Hey, thanks for the help. You too, old bud, both of you guys. Amsterdam. I got to get to Amsterdam. Oh, man. Hey, Emmanuel, it's going great. Tim Miso is outstanding. I agree. I mean, that's the problem with him. I don't want to listen to him because I can't afford to listen to Tim. No, Tim's stuff is very good. He goes into some depth, but it sounds like he's eating a chocolate sundae or something. This is really good on everything he goes into depth about. Yeah, so do I. It's like I would first throw the question in a reputable forum and wait for people to chime in. ZL, I tell you now, that is this. I did that recently, and I looked at the forum first. They had it all wrong, and they even verified it. This verifies it. In other words, they used wrong information to verify what they thought was right. And so the forums, there's some forums though that someone will say, well, this is where I found out about it, and you can check out a source, and that can be very helpful. But forums, I take with a grain of salt. And again, especially with the people who think they're absolutely right, and you ask them why, and they don't really have a very good answer for you. Or where did you find that out? Well, everybody knows. You're like, Anyway, so I thought, well, what do you guys think? Okay. Yeah, Junior, he can make a Parnas sound better than a Patek. You're right. Look at this. You really want this, don't you? I love the guy, but the thing is, he's the kind of guy who really appreciates watch. I don't detect a sort of a used car salesman, and I hate to say that because I know some used car salesmen who are very nice people, but there's none of the avarice, I guess. Here's the guy who really loves watches and is really good at finding out about them. And in my opinion, he's probably the best salesman I've ever seen for. And I think the way to go with buying a watch in this sense, I should say not buying, but selling a watch. If I were selling watches, I'd want someone like Tim there, as opposed to someone who was like totally objective in this sense, because you want to sell watches. And so this brings up the whole issue. If someone is trying to sell you something and it sounds really good on the basis of everything they say, it's like, well, that's really good information. I think it's a good source of information to then go from there on. I don't know. Hey, Paul, um, can sell ice cream to Eskimo. I agree. Yeah, I always say he can sell rowboats to desert rats. You're right. Hi, Owen Chan. How you doing? Hi, Howard. Is a consummate gentleman. He is capable of the highlights level of scholarship. His enthusiasm about watches of all levels horology is genuine. He has total lack of horological snobbery. Exactly. Well put, Howard. I agree. There's nothing I don't agree with about that. But on the other hand, if you have someone who is boringly objective, all right, you're gonna listen to somebody who's not boringly objective, and because there is. I don't think Tim would have the show and have everything else that he has if he were not convincing. He is a gentleman, well educated, and everything else that you want in someone who helps you, find out about watches. And no doubt about that. That's not the point. The point is, if I'm selling ice cream to the Eskimos, I mean, is that you can make it sound like you're not getting a sundae from Tim, you're getting a hot fudge sundae. All right. And it's one of those things that it's not somebody I distrust. Quite the opposite. I trust him too much. I don't know. Hey, Tennessee Mike, how's it going? Yeah, he's extreme. He's both. I agree. I've seen him talk about watches that aren't for sale, and he's the same way. So that's a very good thing. That's how come I listen to him, but I also know he's selling watches, and he does a spectacular job of it. So it's one of those things. So when we talk about resources, we have different kinds of resources of information. Now, if I want to know, for example, what kind of metal do they use on their hairsprings, okay, and something like that, very technical. I'm sure Tim would know that without a doubt. But maybe my friend, the former judge, he would know it too. But I think be more objective about it. It was really funny. He was extremely high on A. Longa. This is the guy who used to be the judge of the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève. He was, and he's German, so he was extremely high on A. Longa. And then something turned, and he said they quit doing a lot of stuff. And then I started reading things that after Richemont took over, things started changing, and they didn't have the same kind of innovations and other things like that. Now, to what extent that's true, that's the problem. All right. And you got passionate people are passionate about watches, that's for sure. And that's what we want. But on the other hand, it's really rough to figure out, okay, is this real information, or is this somebody who just some crazy watch enthusiast? I don't know. Okay. Hey, Dominic. Tim raises interest in watches he reviews. It's a potential buyer to dig up the dirt, if any. Oh, hey, listen, Dominic, like I said, he's one of my favorite guys to listen to. The other guy I like, but I have a hard time understanding is he may be Swiss or Austrian or something like that. Is the guy who has the watches. He's excellent, and he really knows a lot of stuff, and he talks to everybody, and he loves watches. I've seen his collection. He showed his collection one day, and it's the reason I like him. It's the kind of stuff that I'd probably buy too, because he can't afford all of the watches that he reviews, and I sure can't either. Hey, Raj, when Tim also reviews the watch, he never hesitates while thinking of something to say. It's all there in his head, waiting to pour it out. Usually when Tim has something, he's got it in front of him in a laptop. All right, that's where it is. And so he doesn't make a mistake. Me, I make mistakes all the time, not only with pronunciation, but sometimes I'll get my facts wrong. Um, but that, Tim's the guy I trust. If I see a review by him, um, I trust the information to be there. The passion, there's certain things that if you call it a passion, it becomes such a buzzword in selling watches that I don't quite embrace it as one might. All right, oh, this person has passion, they must know stuff. They can have passion and not know jack. Tim is not one of those people. He's a guy who knows a lot of stuff and he's passionate about it, and he sells watches. All right, you take those things together. Now, nothing wrong with that. I mean, sort of Tim. I look at Tim as the kind of good lubrication to keep it all moving. Howard, because he likes the Sin brand. It's not a matter of that. I mean, it's like whatever is on the table at Watchbox. And I would agree, it's not just the Pateks and the FP Journes and all of the other ones that are all around him. The thing is too, is that if you look at his watches, he's got really, I think, good taste, and he's a smart guy, and I respect that. All I'm saying is that everything that he has, I want. And so is that if it's sort of like, like gimme, 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 listening to Tim talk, it's not because I don't believe him, it's that I believe him too much. And so I gotta it's sort of like one of those things when you hear about if a deal is too good to be true, it probably is. So, but no, Tim's not a snob. He does his homework. He does the research, and no, I got a lot of respect for him, and he presents it well. He has an excellent presentation. So there, and I think his passion is genuine. When he had that collection review with Richard Tevan picked up a Rolf Lang, and there was no way that there was going to be a Rolf Lang at Watchbox anytime soon. He just loved it. I thought, okay. And it was like his joy is something, I think, that is part of why people would want to buy watches. All right. And it's like, I think passion is faked, all right, by some. And you see that word used again and again. With Tim, he doesn't have to fake it. He's got it. But that doesn't mean that I should, if I tried to buy everything that Tim recommended, I'd be broke. But anyway, so let's go back then to the whole issue of where do we get good information? I mean, information is saying, okay, this is solid information based on what I'm looking at. Now, I already told you about the guy. There's this one guy who writes a lot of stuff. In fact, I think he's the administrator for the Watch Pro site. And I've chased the guy down, and I was trying to find out about sort of the makeup of my Harry Winston. He was the only guy that knew anything about it. When I tried to contact him, he had a stroke, not because of me. It just, poor guy, had bam, got hit by a stroke. And so I had a hard time getting information. And even I'm not that crazy to bug somebody who just went through a stroke. Crazy, yes, but not that crazy. Hey, watch out. So really what I guess I'm trying to get to is where can we find information? Well, first of all, we got to ask, what are we asking about? When you ask about something like the 736, the Jacquet 736, there are all kinds of problems that you run into. Primarily, Jean-Pierre Jacquet, who developed it, was banned from the watch business. And so I think that any inquiry to him, I don't know where he um, is problematic, and to a great extent. And but the information, and even even talking to Roland Murphy, who knew the guy and bought a bunch of these 736s from him. He only knows so much, and it's one of those things. I mean, it's like, let's say you were selling watches, and Jeffrey Epstein came in and bought a really good watch from you. He was very nice to you, inquired about your family, especially your daughters, and so like, okay, he was a nice guy. It would be somebody who you probably wouldn't want to talk about as being a buddy at one time. Here was a guy that was convicted of stealing all these gold Rolexes. I mean, this was a robbery. This wasn't, like the usual kind of fakery that watch companies do. And so there's hesitation to people admitting even knowing the guy. All right. So, I mean, you talk to a watch seller who may have had $100,000 sale to Jeffrey Epstein. The seller, I don't remember the guy. So these are things I think to consider. Is that how do you get information from problematic places that's both useful and accurate? I mean, there's a lot of useless information out there too. Yeah, Clyde, this is what I look for too. See, there are also people, if I see somebody who is really good at that once, then I'll look for them again. And there's usually a pretty good, consistent record there. Well, somebody that writes a review, and it's all of those things that I like. One thing that Watchbox has that I found that was just fantastic, and I don't know whether Tim writes these or not. He may, because they're extremely well written and very informative. And that is the write-ups they have about watches. I was reading a write-up about a Roger Debris, and it was brilliant. It had everything I needed to know. So anyway, it's these kinds of things. Okay, I learned that fried chicken buckets make great hats. Oh boy. Good talk the other day, Paul. Okay, Paul, what are you up to? Who is the authority on vintage? I tell you who it's not. It's not me by a long shot. I don't know very much about vintage. That's a good question, Paul. It's one of those things that I don't pay much attention to, except maybe in a historical sense. And I'm talking vintages. Usually they talk about vintage as being pre-1990, but it's more and more getting to be vintages pre-21st century. So now anything that's 20th century is, I guess, considered vintage. I don't have too many watches from that era. This one, in a way, this is a vintage style. It's styled after the 1930s. That's what it's called. But nothing vintage about it, including the Beauvais. On the other hand, my 1940 Beauvais Monoretra Ponte from 1940. Now that's a true vintage, and I tried finding out things about it, and there apparently one of the Beauvais, someone from the Beauvais family, patented something with the Monoretra Ponte. But then I read something else that maybe they didn't have the right to do so, even though they did. And, you don't know about these things. Is that there's so much on every level. And so rather than concentrating on vintage, I sort of like to concentrate on contemporary watches, but, knowing something about their history. And you run into watches that are early 2000 that maybe dip back into the 90s, like the watch I really like. What's it called? the Vacheron Constantin Thunderbird or the Vacheron Constantin Royal Eagle that sort of goes from vintage to modern, or the entire collection of Patek Philippe's gondolas, which are now 86, or the Rolex, the new Rolex prints that came out, I think, in 2002 or 2004 when they brought it back, and then they killed it again. Anyway, Paul, to answer your question, is that I just do the same kind of researching that I do on everything else. And another thing too, if I'm looking at a watch, I've been looking at their Facebook pages that people specialize in something. And so if like, what's that one? Silberman, I think. If you like his watches, you can go find a webpage. That's all they talk about are Silberman. Of course, there's no dearth of Rolex pages. That's another source, and they're all over the map, and especially if you're dealing with enthusiasts. Okay, going to the manufacturer directly. Okay, Richard, let me tell you about that, okay? My experience. I've had excellent experience. When I went to Agenor about the bi-retrograde, I ran into Niklas Wiederreck and got great information, including diagrams of the thing I was asking about. When I went to El Leroy about what was in my watch, they lied to me, all right? So sometimes the manufacturer's good, sometimes not so much. And so this is why I think you need to know something. If I go to a manufacturer, I'm going to learn everything I can about a watch. And then if what they tell me is consistent with what I know, then I'm more likely to trust them. If they start blowing smoke, then would be. Yes, Clyde, I'm the authority on being vintage, not understanding vintage watches. Fratello watches is a good source for vintage Omega and stuff. Okay. Don't the lugs hurt? What, these lugs? Not at all. These are great lugs. In fact, they're some of the most comfortable lugs around because they wrap around. This bow and crown just wraps right around. What's for someone who claims to not have a preference or bias, or someone who does and doesn't acknowledge it? I would say the latter, Clyde. That's a good point. How do you find out? Is that it's really hard. Okay. Take care, Geezer. He drew out the most thin watch that Breguet ever had made. Francis Eaton, 11 o'clock. That's good. Okay, guys. Well, listen, one other thing too, sort of time's up, and that's pretty close to being on time, so I can end on time. Tomorrow is going to be the last day we have our pandemic pallet fork discussions. I was going to do this until June 1st because we've all been locked up, but now they're starting to open up, and I know a lot of people are going to work outside of their homes. And so what I decided to do, I'll just go back to what we had before, which was every Saturday we had a live stream. Well, today, as a matter of fact, in the afternoon at 4 o'clock. But since there were so many people who only could work with the morning one, so I'll just have it once a week on Saturday after Monday. Tomorrow will be the last day that we're going to have in the morning and evening on a everyday basis. But after that, we'll just do it once a week on Wednesday, okay? Hey, Tanzil. So anyway, you guys take care, be safe, and around this afternoon, I'll see you then.